let me say that I'm also going to do, I don't have the benefit of my notes, so I'm going to have to do this in the order in which I think I recall in which I'm supposed to run this hearing. So if something appears to be amiss, feel free to raise your hand. Normally I've got a little cheat sheet with the order in which to do things, but I don't have that presently with me. I'm in my office downtown and not in the city of Newcastle right now. All right, Kim, are we ready?
We are ready, and we have 3 people in the audience.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael J. Quaranta. I'm the mayor of the city of Newcastle. Today is the 12th of August, 2020. This is a hearing, a Board of Adjustment hearing that we are doing virtually for the purposes of discussing an application before us here tonight. Mr. Lasco, I believe at this point I have to read the applicant notice into the record, correct? All right.
That's right, unless you'd like me to do it.
No, I'm happy to do it. An application has been filed by Claire Holdings LLC, 315 14th Street, Newcastle, Delaware, 19720. They're the owner, and Michael Carter, 70 Southgate Boulevard, Newcastle, Delaware, 19720, applicant, to appeal the building official's decision of March 24, 2020, denying collision repair and vehicle painting as not permitted uses per in the downtown gateway district per code section 230-21.1 parens E and parens for a property located in the downtown gateway district known as 423 West 7th Street / 0 Gray Street, Newcastle, Delaware, tax parcel number 21-014.00-491 and part of tax parcel number 21-014.00-555. For purposes of considering this application, the Board of Adjustment will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, August 12th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. via Zoom conferencing, posted by myself on July 28th, 2020, Board of Adjustment 2020-06, 423 West 7th Street.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can just note for the record that the record will include notice of the sign that was photographed on the site to advertise the public meeting, as well as affidavit of publication in the News Journal, and I believe in the Newcastle Weekly as well. So just for the record, this meeting has been properly noticed.
Very good. Thank you, Councilor. I would also ask for those who are not, and I think most people are doing this, if you're not presently speaking, it will probably help with telecommunications if you put yourself either on mute and or block your camera for until it's your turn, just because it'll help communications and there won't be any interruption in communication, so everybody can hear everybody. Yeah, I will say this, having hosted and both here in my office professionally and also with the city, other meetings like this, there are times where things get staticky, and we will go back and we will give everybody an opportunity to get connected so that they can be their points and or commentary can be clearly enunciated so that the record reflects that, and then also people regardless of their perspective on this will have an opportunity to understand and hear clearly what's being said. So if anybody isn't presently speaking, if they want to mute and if they want to hide their camera for a bit, we can call on them when necessary. That'll just help with transmission. Okay. With that, is the applicant present?
Yes, the applicant is present, yes.
Okay. And Mr. Lasco, would you swear in the applicant, please?
All right, thanks. This is Dan Lasco. Mr. Redondo, you said you have your witnesses present.
Yes.
Who are those individuals?
Michael Carter, possibly Russell Felme. They're the applicants. They're the owners of the business that have the property under contract. And Mr. Anthony Gambacorta, the owner of the property.
Can we get them into the view shed of your screen there and ask them to raise their right hands and we'll swear them in? All right, gentlemen, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? That's a yes? Am I hearing a yes? Is anybody
He's
hearing
hearing it.
anything?
Not hearing anything.
All right, I think we got an affirmative there. Nod your heads if that's true.
Okay,
Yes.
very good. All right, very
Okay.
good. All right.
And one more thing, Mr. Mayor, before we proceed. I have done legal work for the owner of this property, Claire Holdings LLC, and accordingly, I won't be able to deliberate or vote on this matter tonight, so I'll voluntarily recuse myself. I'm here for procedural questions and note-taking, and I'll, of course, draft the decision of the board as it's made.
Very good, thank you. All right. Counselor, if you would like to present your client's case, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this opportunity to be here tonight. This is an appeal from Mr. Bergstrom's decision dated March 24, 2020. I do want to point out, however, that while we're appealing his decision, after he issued it initially, we didn't go back to him and provide additional information that may have actually resulted in a different decision. Those issues we set forth in the information that we provided today. And I think that this ability to provide additional information hopefully will clarify concerns of the building official. Essentially, my clients, Michael Carter and Russell Femley, are the equitable owners of the property. They have it under contract. They'd like to buy the property and establish their shop there. The types of uses at that shop include what we've requested in our zoning verification: vehicle repair and maintenance, collision repair, vehicle painting, vehicle detailing, and tire service. When I submitted this request to Mr. Bergstrom, I didn't break down the percentages of the uses. And in preparing for this hearing, it is important to note that the two uses that Mr. Bergstrom determined could not be permitted uses are a very small part of the overall business model. My client's business is essentially corporate maintenance and repair of vehicles. So they basically take care of corporate vehicles, maintaining them along the way, repairing when needed. There is an aspect of the business, an important aspect related to collision repair and painting, but as set forth in the memo that I provided earlier today, that's probably only about 10% of their business. And that is a pretty significant factor as I go through my memo and argument, because there are multiple bases upon which we believe the 5 uses that we are seeking approval for should be permitted.
Counselor, when you say the memo, you're referring to the August 12th, 2020 document, this one?
That's correct, yes. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good, thank you.
So in that memo, I recite what we sought in our zoning verification for approval, those 5 items. Mr. Bergstrom determined that the property could be used for vehicle repair and maintenance, vehicle detailing, and tire service, all of which my client does as part of the corporate maintenance programs that he has going on in his business. He did indicate that collision repair and vehicle painting were not permitted uses in the SC. As we started looking into this a little further before this hearing and started looking at the case law in light of the decision, we studied the issue more closely. The SC district that is a zoning district, or at least we understand the DG zoning is overlaid at this time, but what we're looking at tonight is the application of the uses in the SC district. Does permit vehicle services. And as set forth in my memo, service is not a defined term. We had interpreted prior to submitting our request that the 5 things we sought were in fact services, and therefore we thought we'd get an approval letter for all 5 uses. And looking further into the matter, it appears that with services being undefined, the Delaware courts, including Delaware Supreme Court, Delaware Chancery Court, have all concluded that the widest possible definition should be given to undefined terms such as services. In my memo, I did cite the cases related to this, because I do think at the end of the day, this is really a legal issue as to whether or not these uses should be permitted as a matter of right, or perhaps independently as an accessory use to permitted uses. In terms of the Delaware case law, the Supreme Court has ruled several times that when there are two reasonable interpretations of a statute, the interpretation that favors the landowner should control. I cited a variety of cases that stood for propositions that zoning ordinances must be clear and unambiguous so that a person of ordinary intelligence need not guess what they mean. Further, in other cases, it has been held that the zoning laws are subject to strict construction in favor of the right of a property owner to free use of his or her property. There are a number of cases cited for that same proposition throughout my memo. I found one case particularly interesting that I cited in my memorandum, the case of Marino Properties LLC versus Mayor and Town Council of the town of Ocean View. In that particular case, the applicant wanted to have a convenience store with gas pumps, but the code only indicated they could have a convenience store. So the town took the position that because it did not say gas pumps, they could not have gas pumps. So the applicant filed a lawsuit and said, but we can have convenience stores and convenience stores have gas pumps. Therefore, we should be able to have gas pumps, even though it's not permitted in the code. And what Vice Chancellor Glasscock said in this case is that because a gas pump is a natural part of a convenience store, they should be permitted even though not listed in the code. And he ruled summary judgment in favor of the applicant and against the town. And by doing that, as in this case, he looked at what convenience stores have. Now, Mr. Bergstrom in this particular case did agree that vehicle repair and maintenance are permitted uses in the SC zoning category, which we're looking at here today. Our position is that if vehicle repair and maintenance are permitted uses, that collision repair and vehicle painting should also be a part of that, part and parcel with that, because some vehicle repairs require body work and painting. I did want to point out, after further review with my client, that 90% of their business is vehicle repair and maintenance, vehicle detailing and tire service. 10% is collision repair and vehicle painting. The City of Newcastle Code actually indicates in the SC district that accessory uses that are incidental and customary to and associated with the operation of the permitted use are also permitted. So while we think that collision repair and vehicle painting as a matter of right are a permitted use and stand on their own, independent of that, separately from that, a second argument is that being only 10% of their business, that is an accessory use. And I think it's hard to argue with the fact that sometimes there's going to be a repair that requires some body work and some painting along with that. And so we would argue that these uses are a permitted use, but if you were to conclude it was not a permitted use, that it also could be considered an accessory use, which would be independent approval of this. My clients have a very small business. They have 3 employees in the business, and they don't think they can grow more than another employee or 2. So this is always going to remain a small business. 2 people work in the shop, 1 person works in the office. At the bottom of each page, I wrote page numbers in the exhibit package, and I have Mr. Bergstrom's letter as pages
This letter
6 and
right
7.
here.
Correct. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Pages 6 and 7, and I know I've already alluded to what he concluded here, that he concluded that vehicle repair and maintenance were approved, vehicle detailing and tire service were approved. my clients understand that the DG zoning was applied 7 years ago, and that in 3 years, the DG zoning will then supersede the prior zoning. They understand that, and they further understand, as Mr. Bergstrom indicated, that at that point, they become illegal if they were approved, a legal non-conforming use. If they abandoned that use, they would not be able to have that use any further. I noticed that some of the opponent letters indicated that, well, this violates the DG zoning. At this point, I don't think the argument is whether it's violative of the DG zoning, because I think that the issue tonight are these 5 uses permitted under the SC zoning, or are they an accessory use to the SC zoning? So we know that there is a, I just got an alert on my computer. Can I just plug in my computer real quick? Because it said it's getting low on power.
Feel free. Dan, while he's doing a procedural question, are we doing questions, and are we going to Mr. Bergstrom for comments?
You can entertain questions anytime you're ready. So whether it's for the applicant, or if you want to divert to Mr. Bergstrom with a question, you can do that any way you wish in this type of a proceeding. You may want to wait until the applicant's finished and then
Sure.
Yep. Quiz Mr. Bergstrom as well, though. Just
Okay.
Might be a little more organized.
Great. All right. Counselor, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for that. So page 8 and 9 is actually a copy of section 230-22, which is the SC zoning district description, which states under subpart A, the following uses are permitted as a matter of right.
This one?
Correct. Yes,
Got it.
thank you.
Okay.
And under A4, it states that vehicle sales and service are permitted as a matter of right. And our argument is that the 5 things we're seeking are service items that you would naturally see, because this is vehicle sales and service. There are many examples out there of where there are vehicle sales and service, which includes body shops and other things, regular maintenance and repairs. And also wanted to point out on the same first page, 230-22A13, and that's where it states accessory uses clearly incidental and customary to and associated with the operation of the permitted use. So essentially, under the accessory use language under A13, the city of Newcastle has already concluded that repairs, that vehicle repair and maintenance were permitted uses. So we would argue as an independent basis for approval as an accessory use that that painting and body work could be certainly, if it's not a repair, it's certainly incidental and customary to doing a repair, particularly in this case where we have a small business and the aspects of collision repair and vehicle painting is just a small part of the business. While it's a small part of the business, it's a very critical part of the business because they have corporate vehicles coming in there with the expectation that not only will they conduct the routine maintenance, replacing windshields, windshield wipers, tires, putting the oil in, making sure all the fluids are proper, but if one of the vehicles happens to get into a fender bender, the expectation is that can be taken care of at the same location. So it's absolutely critical for their business that they have this ability. I know that you're all familiar with the property, but I want to run through with you what this applicant would like to do if approved. On exhibit 12 or page 12 of the exhibit package,
Would you like me to bring that up on a share screen?
That'd be great, thanks. That way the public can see it too. Counselor, you said page 12, right?
Yes, please.
Right about there, Kim.
Perfect. That's perfect. Thank you. So the property in question is off of West 7th Street. The property that my clients will be purchasing is about 1 acre of land. But what's important to note is that the property they're purchasing is set off back from West 7th Street. In fact, there's about 200 feet from West 7th Street to the front of the property they'd be purchasing. So the whole front portion of the property will not be part of what my clients are purchasing. Mr. Gambacorta is here with us this evening. At some point, there is an expectation to develop the front parcel, which is approximately 200 feet by 150 feet. And Mr. Gambacorta is willing to commit to developing that 100% consistent with the DG zoning, even if in the next couple of years the property was to be developed. But essentially, my clients are trying to buy an existing building that is in very good condition. It's a garage. It used to be a body shop for the auto dealer that was there. It has very limited purpose other than that type of use, but it's in excellent condition. And it, quite frankly, doesn't make any sense to demolish that asset that's a usable asset with substantial value that my clients intend to go in and do a lot of cosmetic and other improvements to it. But from an economic point of view, there's no logic that would suggest that this building should be demolished at this stage. It's in excellent condition. It has substantial value. My clients can use the building for the purpose that it was been used for many years. It's currently a transmission shop, but it was a body shop for the car dealership years ago. So on this plan, what you're seeing on this plan is the building is to the left side. It says accurate collision. That's where the building is. There is a dotted line that actually separates this building from another building in the back that is owned by a different person. My clients are not trying to buy that back building because it's owned by a third party. So they're essentially have under contract the building that says accurate collision, and that wording is essentially right in the center of what they'd be purchasing. They'd also be purchasing the land immediately in front of that, which is 2 rows of parking. And then the area I highlighted on this, that would be a fenced area. Any vehicles that were there to be worked on would be kept in the fenced area, would be completely screened 100%. No one would see the vehicles. My client's business model is not to have junk cars there. They do not collect parts there. They simply get a car and they try to move them out within 3 to 5 days. That's the goal. In this day and age, car repairs are very expensive. A car that is totaled is very unlikely to ever see this lot. They would go directly to auto auction or auto row on Airport Road with all the other junk cars. So the cars that come into this lot are cars that can be repaired, and they're in and out 3 to 5 days. When they're waiting to be serviced, they would be out in the fenced lot, but they would not be visible to anyone. There's no work would be done outside. All work would be done inside the building. And
What's the approximate square footage of the building, please?
6,000 square feet.
Thank you.
So all work would be done inside the building, and my clients want to do certain improvements to the building, including putting new garage doors on and putting an HVAC system into the building. And that will allow them to close the doors while they're working, which is something that you can't do now because there's no ventilation in there. So what they intend to do is to put ventilation in, put HVAC in, close the garage doors, all the work's done inside the building, and it'll all be done with the doors down. So they do have a small lot with no visibility. Now, when we started this process, we said, well, let's put some landscaping on the property to further, to improve the property. Because essentially, I know you're all familiar with the property, basically from West 7th Street to the back of this building is 100% asphalt. So we talked about putting some landscaping in the front, and it was not really, we didn't really feel like that was going to do it. So we actually retained a landscape architect to help us to come up with a better plan for what we could do here. If we could please go to the next page, page 13. Stop right there is perfect. So what this is a landscape plan that shows a much heftier landscaping along the entire front of the property. And what that's going to shield really is the building and the parking of customers and employees in the front. But there's going to be landscaping that runs along the entire front of the property, in front of the fenced area, and then alongside the fenced area on the side. So essentially, the business is not going to be visible from West 7th Street. And even the fenced area is going to have landscaping in front of that. We had Ellen Tracy, a landscape architect, design this for us. If you could please turn, I'm sorry, before I move to the next slide, there are 45 evergreens proposed for along this property line. If I could go to the next slide, please. And I know this is not the best angle to look at this, but essentially you can see on this slide, we have a row of evergreens.
I think we can rotate it.
Oh, that's great. Oh, awesome. Oh, cool. That's great. That's very helpful. So from West 7th Street, what you'll be looking at on West 7th Street are this row of evergreens, and they are intentionally different colors because they're different evergreens, because the landscape architect has advised us that you want to have a mixture of evergreens in case of illness of these trees. They don't run down the whole row. Essentially it provides a division so that if they get certain illnesses, we're still going to have the rest of them in place. Plus it looks a lot better. Instead of having just a straight row of one type of tree, it's going to be a mixture of trees that go along the front. So the north elevation shows the evergreens that you see from West 7th Street. The west elevation is when you're in the parking lot looking across to the fenced in area across the parking lot. There's no trees along there because that's how you get into the parking area, but the trees beyond that, you'll see them. The landscape detail that we show here, the evergreens will be planted at 5 to 6 feet. So they're going to start out as a good size. You don't want to go in too big because to have healthy growth, you know, our landscape architects suggested 5 to 6 feet starting. That will help them grow healthier and stronger. But these arborvitaes and evergreens shown here are fast growers. So within a very short time, there will be a very substantial screen there. The east elevation shows looking at the fenced-in area. And you'll see we have another variety of trees for that area. So the idea is to make it a lot more appealing than it is right now. Instead of a sea of asphalt, what you're going to have is 200 feet of frontage on West 7th Street. Then you're going to have the evergreen row, the customer and employee parking beyond that, and then the building. So if I could please move to the next exhibit. Essentially, my client wants to be a good citizen of Newcastle. He lives in the area. He's been in this business for 18 years. He's owned his own business for 10 years. Like I said, it's a small business with 3 total employees, and it might get to maybe 5, but it's not going to be a big business. What they are proposing to do, if they're able to purchase the property, is put new doors in the building, install all the landscaping, put a new roof and new siding on the building, clean and paint the areas that painted, clean up the area, the rear of the property, remove all trash, overgrowth, and debris. Install the fence that I showed earlier. They're happy to do it in a vinyl or wood, whatever is preferred by the city. I did note in one letter where someone suggested there are environmental issues on the property. As a part of the process we're in right now to potentially purchase the property, we have an environmental engineer lined up. If we were to gain this approval, have an environmental engineer immediately conduct an investigation to try and enter the property into the brownfields program, which is a really excellent program for people who are buying properties. A current owner could not enter that program, but someone buying the property can enter that program, and DENREC and the state assist with the cost of doing the improvements and environmental cleanup of that area. So it's actually part of our contract that we're gonna, if we need to have environmental work done, part of our contract is to go through the brownfields program. It will delay settlement, but from my client's perspective, they want to make sure that it's an environmentally clean property. There is a building behind my client's property that needs some work. We need to disconnect from that building, and we'll work with that owner to take care of cleaning that up because it's kind of messy back there. As I mentioned earlier, item 9, we want to install, we're going to install a new HVAC system so that the entire building's heated and cooled, and the HVAC system will allow for the doors to be closed during all operations. As I indicated, this is a relatively small operation, 6,000 square feet. I saw one of the letters of opposition talked about how these are types of uses are not permitted in residential areas, but Exhibit 16 is a map on Route 40 that shows a new body shop for Hertzik Acura. And right on Route 40, there's a 32,000 square foot body shop for their business right across the street from a very large residential community. And this only opened in the last 6 months. The building I'm talking about, it's hard to see the writing, but the big black roof building is 32,000 square foot body shop for Hertz Acura. So that's 32,000 square feet. Ours is 6,000 square feet. We have basically a small, really it's a family business, 2 to 3 people related business versus what was recently approved and opened on Route 40, which is right next to a residential community there. You can see that behind that. As far as we were going to clean up environmental issues if they do exist. This use, having one paint box, does not create any environmental issues. We don't believe there's going to be any noise issues, no smell issues. DENREC does monitor paint boxes to make sure there's no issues there. My clients are so small that they could be regulated, but there's never been any issues with that. And like I said, it's a very small operation, and we do not anticipate any problems. I mean, certainly my client wants to be careful for his employees as well as the residential neighbors, but we anticipate no issues with any of the things that people were concerned about, because the nature of this business simply does not lead to that. Without going into all the science of it, one issue was the paints in yesteryear were heavy solvent-based paints, but the paints used today are all water-based paints. So we're in a different world than we lived in not that many years ago when these paints had much different VOCs than what we have today. Very limited now, much, much greater in the past. mean, the owner, Mr. Gambacorta, certainly is prepared to make a statement, but he's been very good working with us. My client is buying, we're trying to buy an acre of land, but we're getting an easement, a 15-foot easement from the owners to plant all that landscaping. And they've agreed with us to give us the 15-foot easement where we can plant all that landscaping to have enough room to make sure that it can grow and be maintained in a manner that they'll thrive and be an asset there versus the sea of asphalt that exists today. Actually, if I could, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Gambacorta to make a short statement, if that would be okay.
That's fine. Please proceed.
Thank you.
Hello all. My name is Anthony Gambacorta. Our family has operated a business in Newcastle for 3 generations. We were always aware of customers coming from other areas, and so we presented that unique, small, friendly town image, which made us attractive to deal with and left them happy to have been in Newcastle. In nice weather, if waiting for service, often we would offer a ride downtown so they could walk through the old cemeteries and the Battery. Talking to the new owners, I think they feel the same way. That attitude has to benefit our town, making people want to come back to visit, shop, and even buy a home. Finally, I point out that a facility owned and operated by the business owner is certainly better than one operated by a renter. Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you very much.
Gambacorta, how have you been trying to sell the property?
Since 2008, before we closed our business.
Okay, so you've not been able to sell it since 2008.
That's correct.
Have you had a realtor involved during that time frame?
Yes. For the past maybe 2 years, I think.
And in terms of the this building, what was that building used for as a part of the auto business that your family had there?
It was built as a body shop and operated for the dealership.
And what is the condition of that building today as it stands?
Very serviceable. It's decent shape, good shape.
If I could also now call Michael Carter, just to give you a little bit of information on him, because I've talked a lot about him, but I think you might want to hear directly from Mr. Carter. He and his partner, Russell Thumay.
Council, let me, before you proceed, and I'm happy to do that, I'd like to ask Mr. Gambacorta a clarifying question, because
Yes.
Mr. Gambacorta, I think, did I understand you to say that the prior use of the building was to do auto body repair and paint? Is that correct?
It was built originally for that purpose.
Okay. Does it presently have all of the amenities that are up to date and necessary? You know, a paint room, a paint bay that's dust free. Does it have all the kinds of things that one needs to do paint work in a contained environment?
Now, in the meantime, that building was used as a service department for repairing cars, not body work. Just it had lifts in it where we could work on cars.
Okay.
No body work.
So the elements that may have been there before for paint and body work are no longer there. Understand. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, these gentlemen intend to bring it up to specifications as far as government, EPA and everything that would be needed.
Understand. Okay. Counselor, if you want to put, was it Michael or was it Russell?
Michael, and I've asked him a question in the meantime, that apparently everything is in place except for the paint box. They would bring a paint box up that's up to current standards and utilize that. And it's important that be the current standards. But
Okay.
if I could please introduce to the board, Michael Carter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time, everybody.
Mr. Carter, could
Mr. Carter,
please
thank you for being here.
Could you please describe your experience with the auto business?
We've been in business I've been doing auto body for 18 years. Me and my partner have been in business for 10 years. Of that 10 years, we stayed, loyal to our customers, and we've never had any incidents with DENREC or, anything like that as far as contamination or fines or anything like that as far as bad business practices.
And in terms of the extent of your business that actually relates to the painting and collision work, what
The
percentage?
painting part of our business is about 10% of the overall business. So
And what is your primary business then?
we do, our main client is the post office. So we do a lot of the postal vehicles, AV services, windshields, tires, any collision repairs they have. We also do those. So
How many people work in the business?
Russell, me, and his sister.
And with
So
this,
there's only 3 of us total.
and with this property being 6,000 square feet, I mean, how big would you anticipate this business growing over time?
We would like to hire probably 2 more people, in our overall goal.
And I know that I've read through the list of improvements that you want to make to the property, but could you please explain to the board the reason why you would do all this?
We want to be a good asset to the community. We don't want to be an eyesore. We don't want to, we don't want to bother anybody. So we want to bring that building up to a nice standard. We want people to ride past and say, hey, that's a nice shop. Let me stop in. We don't want to look like a junkyard or, I know the body shop has a bad image portrayed, but we're not, we're looking to buy this building to fix it up, make it an asset to the community.
And as far as vehicles going through your business, could you just explain us how that works?
Our average turnaround for vehicles is 3 to 5 days. We are not a direct repair shop. So what that means is we don't take in every car. So we kind of select what we work on. We mainly do bumper changes, tire changes. So if somebody comes in with something that's really bad, we normally turn it away. If they call the insurance company won't even let it come to us because we charge $90 a day for storage. So an insurance company does not want a car sitting there on the property because we're not direct repair with them. So we charge them every day a vehicle sits there and it's not being repaired.
And that dissuades them from leaving junk car
Yes. They don't want to leave them there.
there. And do you have any issues with noise or smell at your current location?
No.
And with the garage doors being closed during this business, do you anticipate any issues with
Yeah,
smell?
so
or noise?
one of the improvements we're going to do to that building is fully HVAC the entire building so that the doors can be closed during all operations. More for comfort of ourselves, but it will definitely help with any noise transmitted to the outside.
I don't really have anything further at this time. I didn't know if the board had any questions for us regarding our presentation.
I have a couple of questions. Mr. Athey, you may have questions too. I'd like to ask some of these questions now before I don't want to lose my thinking. So
Go ahead.
I'd like to go ahead and ask a couple questions. So this is actually a business I'm a little bit familiar with. One of my best friends had a body shop in Frederick, Maryland for 40 years before his retirement. So your answer about the direct repair was interesting. Without disclosing, because you're a private business, and look, I'm about as pro-business of a person as you'll ever find. I'm sitting in my office. I am president of the Delaware State Chamber of Commerce. So, I balance my roles here. But the question I have is, within ranges, without disclosing proprietary information, are you a $1 to $5 million book of business a year? Are you a $5 to $10 million book of business a year? Give me a sense of your.
We're under $1 million a year.
Okay, so.
Like I said, there's only 3 of us there, so there's only so much you can do with 3 people.
Oh, I fully understand.
We're more committed to quality and customer satisfaction and pushing a bunch of stuff out of the door.
Understand that.
If you're
Understand that.
familiar with the collision business.
Yep, understand that. Well, here's my question. When your attorney put up the list of improvements that you want to make, and I think maybe you answered, Mr. Carter, some of my questions. So it doesn't sound like you're going to invest in a frame machine that's going to straighten frames. It's like you're going to do small, minor body work as opposed to major collision repair kinds of
Yeah.
things. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. But when you look at that whole list, the doors, the HVAC, the landscaping, the repairs to the building, improvement of the building behind, investment in a paint box.
Well, we already have the paint box.
Okay. I was in my head and I was thinking about your scale. I was just doing a mental note of, that's a
That's a
substantial
hefty nugget,
list.
huh? Yeah.
It's not an inconsequential amount of money.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and let me say this, we're all neighbors, and I appreciate the attitude and spirit with which you're bringing this to us, and that is to improve the area and the community. But the privacy fence, the landscape plan, and we don't know if there are other kinds of things because you've waited to see how this goes before you do an environmental assessment and whether there's any remediation. Your representative does correctly point out, if that is an issue, you do have the potential for some brownfields support as a new owner. But is there an estimate of the overall investment and cost that all of those different changes would cost?
Yeah, so we've already had the HVAC system looked at as far as being able to do something with that. We've been saving for 10 years to do a move like this. So we feel we have more than enough capital to make all these improvements along with purchasing the building, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. All right. But do you estimate the overall accumulated cost of this to be?
We're thinking it's going to be around 100,000, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I was trying to get to to get to a sense of what the overall expense was. Thank you. Okay, I think I have other questions that I want to reserve for the time being because I'd like to hear what Mr. Athey has to say, and then I also want to hear what other presentations we have tonight. But Counselor, that was very thorough, and I appreciate your presentation. And Michael, Mr. Carter, thank you for your comments as well. Mr. Athey, do you have questions?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Yeah, excellent presentation. Frankly, I have really only one question. I do have a question for Mr. Lasco, procedural. But Mr. Redunda, could you clarify, I'm trying to take notes here, that I believe you said words to the effect of, because the property is proposed to change hands, that allows the owners to enter the Brownfields program. I know that's often a very favorable aspect of redevelopment, but I just want to make sure I really understood that. Are you kind of saying that the current owner cannot, or just that by there being a transaction that just allows that program to be entered a little bit more easily? Could you please clarify that?
Sure. Well, the Brownfields program is for new owners, and what that allows is for the state to contribute the first $125,000 towards the investigation and cleanup, and then 50 cents on the dollar up to $250,000. If the new owner was going to, if the current owner tried to get into the program, they have to pay for it themselves. So the benefit is the state is encouraging new owners to enter this program by paying the first $125,000 towards investigation and cleanup, and then something after that as well.
That obviously I wasn't aware of that. That to me is I'm not understand, and I'm not asking you to explain it. Why would the state, if their intent is to clean up contaminated properties, why would they only dangle that carrot on when a transaction's going to occur? Again, it's rhetorical. I don't expect you to answer it. If you care to comment, I would appreciate it. But to me, that there's not a lot of logic there.
Yeah, I think it's just. You're right. That's a good point. Why wouldn't they do it for existing owners? I think because sometimes existing owners created the problem to begin with.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, in a way, it makes okay. All right,
Oh, I
right.
spilled. Now I'm going to use public money to.
Yeah,
go
no,
clean
no,
it
no,
up.
that, yeah, it could reward bad behavior. That does make sense. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Lasko, I think I know the answer to the question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just to kind of get it on the record. The applicant has stated multiple times that the two practices, the collision repair and vehicle painting that Mr. Bergstrom basically opined are not allowed, really represent a pretty small 10% of the overall business. Correct me if I'm wrong, but short of making some sort of a condition, and I can get to that here in a few minutes, but any decision rendered by the board goes with the property, correct? Not the owner. In other words, if the board were to grant or it's not a variance, were to override the building official's decision, not that the owners, I think I value their intent here. It's clearly they're honorable businessmen and are trying to do the right thing, but things happen. They could sell the property in a year, and whatever we decide tonight goes with that property, not with those owners, correct?
I think the answer to that question
There
is
being a
yes.
condition.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, provided there's not a substantial change in the nature of the business that they're operating. I mean, if
Right.
it becomes something more than the particular use that this board might approve tonight, then it may be a different situation for the building official to evaluate.
Right, but all things being equal, it stays with the property. It doesn't go away just because there'd be a change in ownership.
Well, it's not so much it runs with the property. The question is whether or not this use is permitted under this particular zoning classification. So what you've got is a situation here where the savings clause under section E there, 23021.1E, permits SC uses for a 10-year period after the adoption of the DG zoning ordinance. So Mr. Redondo has done a good job of pointing out that the SC zoning classification permits automotive, truck, marine equipment sales and service. He uses the generic vehicle sales and service, but same thing as far as I'm concerned. I think what Mr. Bergstrom's pointed out in his opinion is that a auto body shop is categorized separately as a permitted use in the GC zoning district. And so that's the distinction that the building official has made. And the argument being made here is that, hey, it's a service, it's a vehicle service, whether it's auto body or car repair, it shouldn't matter. And the code doesn't define service, so you have to interpret that broadly. That's the argument being made. The alternative argument being made is that, gee, even if it's not a permitted use, it's only accessory to the primary use of vehicle repair. So those are the two arguments being presented. So it's not so much a question of does this decision run with the land? The question is whether or not a auto body shop that does 10% of its work in, well, I should say a vehicle service shop that does 10% of its work on auto body and painting, is that a permitted use under this savings clause? It's not like a variance that runs with the land.
Yeah, no, and I realize that now. Let me rephrase my question then. Maybe I'll state it more as a statement instead of a question. It doesn't necessarily run with the land. It would run with the entire DG zone. In other words, we would be clarifying the code, and another property owner somewhere could actually, the savings clause notwithstanding in the 10-year time frame and all that, another property owner could put in a collision repair store facility, because if the board basically overturned the building official's decision. So I mean, there's a precedent here, I believe is my point. And I don't want to necessarily say that the current owner or the gentleman proposing to buy it, if it's only 10% of their property, I guess I'm basically coming to the conclusion that that's in essence an irrelevant argument to me. It's not just this property we're dealing with, it's the entire DG zone, and it really could be a precedent-setting decision. That was really and maybe I just answered my own question by just thinking out for a moment.
You're right. If you conclude that auto body work is part and parcel of vehicle sales and service, then another facility in the DG zone that was formerly SC or industrial, well, SC anyway, could just open a body shop that does nothing but body shop work.
Right, right.
Can
Or
I say something?
these gentlemen could sell it to somebody who wanted to do the same thing on this property.
That's correct.
Mr. Carter?
My understanding was that the DG was for a 10-year period. And if we went out of business for more than a year, that we would automatically be changed to DG. Am I
Correct.
Mr. Lasko? Mr.
The
Lasko?
answer to that question is that for the 10-year period, SC uses are permitted on this property because it was formerly zoned SC. If such a use is put into play and continues beyond the 10-year period, it's a non-conforming use that is permitted to continue until it stops for a period of time. Jeff, is it 1 year or 6 months? I can't remember what the code requires at the top of my head. But if the use is if the non-conforming use is interrupted for an extended period, then it's lost, and any future use of the property would have to conform to the DG ordinance.
That's
The only
correct.
thing I want to add is that basically, as I indicated earlier, an independent finding that the board could make tonight is that this is an accessory use to the main use. And that's really important because essentially, if somebody wanted to come in and buy it from them and put in a body shop only, that would not be permitted. They could be shut down immediately. I don't think anyone would put that investment in to do that. So essentially, if you were to conclude because of the limited use, this is an accessory use and not a permitted use, that would stop the concern that I believe you have about a collision, a full-on body shop going in here, and it would take away your argument, not take away your argument, but address your concern that within the SC, someone could put a body shop in. So I think to address your concern, you could conclude that this is an accessory use and the permitted use is a repair and maintenance, as already concluded by the city. Repair and maintenance, vehicle detailing and tire service are the permitted uses, and collision repair and vehicle painting are an accessory use only.
Thank you. Your Honor, I don't have any further questions at this time.
Okay, very good. Counselor, if you have anything else, we'll come back to you at some point, but unless you have anything else, I'd like to turn to Mr. Bergstrom.
That would be fine. Thank you.
Anything else from Mr. Carter? Okay, all right. If you guys could go on mute, that'll help with transmission. So let's go to Mr. Bergstrom. Mr. Bergstrom, are you off mute? It looks like you are.
Yes,
Your comments, please.
Right. It's been an interesting bit of information presented this evening. You saw my my decision, and I think I decided things based on the law the best I understood them the moment I made the decision. If you want to change my decision, that's certainly your purview. Dan, I don't know whether that's there's any much more I should be, saying.
All right. All right. I read I read the letter. I read the decision letter that you submitted, and I marked it up. And I had I don't have any questions. I think. Let me, Mr. Athey, do you have any questions for Mr. Bergstrom at this time?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, all right. Mr. Lasko, is it at this point we invite public comment, or do we postpone that, or we're not ready to end the hearing per se, or the testimony part of the hearing?
No, we would continue with testimony. The applicants made their case. You've asked whatever questions you had of him and the building official. The time is now to inquire about public comment and open up that room so that anybody who wants to make comment about it. Before you do that, There have been 2 letters that have been submitted to the board prior to the hearing. Kim, I think, can put these up on the screen, but I believe that both the applicant and the board has previously seen these when they came through in the last couple of days. Essentially, the argument, I'll summarize the one, is the application does not meet the code because collision repair and vehicle painting are not SC uses, in the opinion of this particular member of the public. Basically, that's the same conclusion that the building official reached. The second, that the use of the property for vehicle painting and collision would contradict environmental protection standards. I think, frankly, what they're referring to is air quality issues and environmental contamination. And they made the comment that no town, municipality, or county in the state has allowed an automotive body paint repair business to open or start up next to or adjacent to a residential property. I know Mr. Redunda addressed that himself. The third point that was raised in that letter was that allowing a new location for a paint body shop would run counter to the purposes of the downtown Gateway District. So that's just a fast summary of that particular letter that was submitted. It may be better to open it up to the public and allow them to address any other complaints or observations that they have.
All right. And I will say before we do that, I have a couple of questions. Kim, I'm going to go back to the applicant for a minute because before we do this, I do have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask the counsel for the applicant. So if you could go back from shared screen. So counselor, you might want to come off mute. So a couple questions that I had. I read your memo a couple of times, and I just wanted to ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
So you cite in different case law, I believe this is the Accord. No, it's the which case is this? Is a practical matter? Yeah, sorry. So bottom of page 2, within the scope of purposes, Accord Rathkoff, law of zoning and planning. You cite that the wording of a zoning ordinance must be clear, unambiguous, so that a person of ordinary intelligence need not guess as its meaning. So my question is this. Is the subject property in the SC zoning designation, or is it in the GC designation?
Is in the SC district, and our argument is that when it says that you can have.
Understand the argument.
Sure,
Understand the
okay.
argument. Understand the argument. I don't find then, because when this was created, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around, what might be unambiguous about this. So I marked up the SC code section, and I marked up the GC code section, okay?
Correct.
So when those were created, when they were put into the city code, and that predates my tenure of service either on the city council or as mayor, somebody very intentionally divided auto repair, fixing tires, doing mechanical work, and things of that nature, which they envisioned in the service commercial district, and very, in my estimation, intentionally and unambiguously created very specific language for the general commercial district. And section, I think it was 2034, letter E, where it very much calls out automotive paint and body shops. So I'd like your response because I don't think, here's my question to you. I don't find much ambiguity in the differentiation between the two. I think the council, when they created the code, was quite intentional about dividing the two. Your thoughts?
My first response to that essentially is that the term service should be a defined term, because service is permitted in the SC, is not defined. I mean, that was an error not to define that, because what these cases say is when you leave a term like that, a very essential term, not defined, that's when you have to go and give the widest possible latitude to what that might include in favor of the landowner. And that's what Delaware Supreme Court has said on multiple occasions in the cases I cited, as well as the Chancery Court. So we have Delaware's top court saying to legislators, you can't leave undefined terms there. You can't say in the Chancery Court case, you can only have a convenience store, and because it doesn't say gas pumps, you can't have gas pumps. No, it says.
Counselor, if you don't mind, I get that. I get that. However,
Right.
that's not the question I asked.
Okay, well,
the-
right.
The question
My
I
first
asked is the two sections of the zoning code very clearly differentiate, because the council at the time decided to separate the permitted uses and in a very unambiguous way. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that?
Well, I disagree with that because there's a lot of gray area in between. This is clear, the use that we're talking about here tonight is not a body shop in terms of what a body shop is. Go down to that property on Route 40 and see a 32,000 square foot body shop that is a body shop for collision repair, and that is their sole purpose of that 32,000 square feet. As described here, we're talking about a repair shop that does some body work and some painting. It's a small part of their business. And quite frankly, I think that's why in the section under the SC district, it says that you can have an accessory use. So even if you disagree with our argument that it's a permitted use in the SC, if you can flat out disagree and say, I'm not accepting that argument that a body shop is permitted in the SC.
Well, let me ask you this about the accessory use then, okay? So in the context of stay in the automotive business for a minute, would you not say though that the intent behind the accessory use might have been the following? So Mr. Carter may repair a flat tire. He may have a wheel alignment capability. An accessory use could be that he decides to sell tires. They're all within the same origin of tire sales, service, etc. That is an accessory. What I'm struggling with is the very clear differentiation that the council created when they made this code, where they separated auto body from other types of repair.
I think that it's a two-part question. And the first question is it a permitted use standing on its own in the SC district? That's the first question. And the answer yes or no to that. We know, based on the code official's opinion and decision, that vehicle repair and maintenance are permitted in the SC. So you answer yes or no to the first question, then you go to the second question. The second question is, if you're allowed to do vehicle repair and maintenance, does that permit as an accessory use some body work and painting? And my client's use here is minimal compared to the 90% of what they do that relates to regular repairs and maintenance for fleet vehicles. But fleet vehicle maintenance and repairs from time to time involve body work. So I think it's a two-part question, whether or not it's permitted as a matter of right in the SC, yes or no. And if you say no, then you go to the second question. is that an accessory use to a repair? And that's where you cannot look at these cases and say that due to the lack of definitions within the code, I don't think you can say no to that second part, because the property owner has substantial property rights as explicitly set forth in the numerous cases we cited by the Delaware Supreme Court. When the code is not clear and specific, you have to err on the side of the property owner. And I think that it's certainly at a minimum an accessory use when repairs are permitted. And that's what we're seeking here. Repairs are permitted. As a part of repairs, it's natural that from time to time, 10% of the business, that there's going to be some body work and painting necessary. So we think that we think the question number one is yes, it's permitted use. But if you disagree with that, then you go to question two. We definitely think it's an accessory use at the extent that it's being utilized here.
So let's talk about the Norino Properties case that you cite on page 4, because I had a question about that too. It says the mayor and town council argued in this case that the convenience store itself was permitted, but the code was silent. And I underline that, silent, with respect to convenience stores with fuel pumps, and therefore a convenience store with fuel pumps was not permitted. And I went to court, and as you point out here, the court ruled in favor of the property owner, saying that because of the silence, that pumps were then permitted with the convenience store. I go back to what I stated earlier. Now, our code, I don't believe, is silent. We've got a differentiation that's clearly delineated in the GC versus the SC sections of the code. So what would be your rejoinder to that point?
Sure, the issue on silence relates to the definition of service, is what it comes down to. I mean, the issue, service is not defined. Service should be given the broadest possible definition. And you can go to many car dealerships in Newcastle County, and many of them have a full body shop and repair shop on their properties. We think that service is automobile vehicle sales and service includes the broadest term. The GC does specifically permit, body shops, but in terms of the silence, it's specifically related to service and how that's defined. There's nothing in this code, and we've researched it very carefully, that says what service means. But
I did look up, if you forgive me for interrupting for a second, I did look up because I have noticed in several locations, yes, there are some pre-existing body repair and collision repair on site at different dealerships. Yes, it is really kind of a mixed bag. I noticed as you come down 13 into the city of Wilmington and you pass the 76ers field house, there's a large collision repair facility in that location, which is completely disassociated with sales and other types of repair services. Similarly, not far from the city boundaries, I wish I could think of the name of the road. I can't. But as you leave the city on 273 crossing 13, and you head down to the next traffic light and turn right, there's another on the just beyond that traffic light, there's another repair facility that is again disassociated with another sales and service location. It's a little bit all over the place, and I didn't have the time to go back and look at seeing where the primary places were located that had, and perhaps you did. If they had sales and they had service and they had auto body all located under one roof, were those places that were typically in an area that is zoned for such uses off of a road like 13, or because I found other places, as I said, that were scattered about, and it would make sense. They may have been physically constrained with space. Sure, there's going to be a bunch of different reasons. Or did they have to disassociate some of those locations because of zoning issues that they had to move around? And so, what does your research tell you?
May I say a few words?
Please.
I
Please.
think that the place you're speaking of is Winter Premier. Winter has a full line of Audi, Volkswagen, Ford. So instead of having five different, excuse me, instead of having five different repair shops, they have one central location, not for one specific make, but for everybody. So they have Winter Premier, who does all their collision work. So
Gotcha.
you have Hertrix Acura, who just opened up in Bear, who, you know, they're not Hertrix Acura, they're Hertrix Collision because they want to fix everybody's car.
All
So
of
if
them.
you're,
Okay.
yeah, so if you're Winter Ford, you're going to get a lot more Fords than if you're just Winter Premier Collision. You're going to
Sure.
get all the cars, right? You know, you're not going to take your Rolex to a, you know, a regular watch service center.
Got it.
That's
So,
kind of the same
so
thing.
right. Okay. So you're saying the way the trend in the industry is that a lot of these larger dealers who
They sell so
sell
many
and service
brands.
multiple brands, they decided that it's by scale, it was smarter to put all of the collision repair into one place.
Yep, you got it,
I
absolutely.
understand.
And can
Got
I say one other thing about your last question you asked him about the two
Please.
different zonings?
Sure.
I think that when that zoning was written years ago, that paint practices weren't that great. You know, there was a lot of shops that just had a fan blowing out the door and paints aren't what they are today. Today we use a product called EnviroBase. So it's a water-based paint system. So it's not the old paints of yesteryears when if you breathed it, you could die. You know, you hear these,
Right.
back in the day, people would paint something, they would almost be brain dead when they were done because they didn't have protective equipment on.
No,
That's not the case today. So
I
I think that
understand.
these two, you know, when they split that up the way they did, it
Mhm.
was kind of for the body shops of yesteryear, before there was really paint booths and the regulatory, you got Denrec, you have all these places checking to make sure you're doing everything the way you should be doing it, you know, so that you don't have issues that they've seen, you know, from years past.
Understand. Very good. Thank you. Okay. I don't think I have any other questions. I wanted to discuss those points. Mr. Athey, anything else before we go to public comment?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. In that case, Ms. Bergmiller, if you would ask, well, I'll ask if there's any members of the public that would like to make any comments at this time.
If you do want to make a comment, just raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to bring in Philip Gross into the meeting.
Okay.
Hold on one second.
Kim, do we have Mr. Gross?
Well, it's giving me, let me turn the chat. Not letting me bring people in.
Well, that's a problem.
Let me see if I can Q&A up here.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Mr. Gross?
Don't have anything yet, Kim.
Can you unmute, Mr. Gross? There you go.
Mr. Gross, do we have you? We don't. All right. We can, is there anybody else that has questions? We can keep trying with him. But is
He's
there
the only
anybody
one
else?
with his hand raised so far.
Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to raise their hand that has any questions? All right. If we have none, let's give Mr. Gross another moment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can finally. Yes, there you are. Turn up your volume and speak clearly, please.
Turning up.
There you
Good.
go. Okay. Let me ask the applicant's counselor. Can you hear him? Can you raise your hand? Can you hear him?
He's
Phil-
muted.
Yeah, he's muted.
Okay. I heard something, a noise, but I didn't hear any words yet.
Okay.
Hey, my name's Philip Gross. I live on Moore Avenue. I guess being a longtime business owner myself and having vehicles that have been serviced and had body work done, you were referring to Winter and a few other places. They strictly do, a majority of all their work is body, and they farm out the mechanical. Just like I'm suggesting that if this board says go ahead with your opening the business, since it is only a 10%, only 10%, but your argument makes it seem like it's more than just 10%, especially when you brought up that some vehicles brought in will be basically rebuilt for auction because they're not going to be serviceable and good enough to go back into the vehicle pool, whether it's the post office or anybody else. So I honestly don't believe, in a truthful way, that 10% of your business is body and collision work. I think it should be farmed out if this board gives the okay. Because again, your major push is for that 10% of the business, you're talking about landscaping, rebuilding, redoing, everything, which I think you should do, even if you do just mechanical, change tires, tune-ups, a windshield. But I honestly don't believe this board should grant acceptance to painting or any kind of major body work. For only 10%, guess what? Farm it out. There's plenty of places that you can get it to and have a good working relationship with, just like every single other mechanical shop. So as far as the expected usage, I think Mr. Athey brought up a good point that if you open up a can of worms, you've set a precedence that's going to be long-standing and hard to close down. And again, our illustrious mayor brought up a couple good points that I think it is separated enough and defined that you can't stretch it by saying, well, if you have service, it includes body work and paint work. I can present a list if needed of plenty of mechanical shops that do not do on-site body and paint work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gross. Counselor, you can come off mute if you'd like to respond to any of the comments that you just heard. Or Mr. Carter or Mr. Gamgorda, anybody is welcome to comment.
Sure, I mean, my client has a small,
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
I think you should ask if there's anybody else from the public that wants to comment before you go back to rebuttal from
Okay.
Mr. Redunda, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Kim, is there anybody else who has raised their hand?
There are no other raised hands, but in the chat, there is a question from anonymous attendee, and I can bring that up on the screen, or you could look in chat. And hold on one second, I'll bring it up.
Yeah, if you can bring it up, because I'm looking for it and I don't think oh, I've got it. I can read it.
Okay.
I can read it. In fact, before I turned this age, I didn't have to pull this thing so close, but anyway. It's from an anonymous attendee. If 10 to 15% are auto body paint services, then why is the name Accurate Collision? Thus, 10 to 15% plus or minus cost of goods should dictate only paint and body suppliers are only a fraction. Is the applicant willing to provide that information to support this claim? NAISC code should dictate body/paint or auto repair dones. These are obviously business codes. If Gamba Gorda used a body shop, where is the license from the state saying license for body shop? 3, the yellow portion for storage is currently used for trash on the side of the building. Where would that go? It can only currently, and I'll go back through this and give you time to digest each of them. There's one chat and one comment, but it's got multiple questions here. Where would that go? It can only currently, the site can only currently store 5 vehicles without trash at best. Number 4, phase 1 or 2 has not been done by applicant, parents due diligence, and parents, so landscaping may not be allowed. 6, timeline for completion for improvements required by bond for approval with estimates. Not sure what that means. Number 7, the $90 per day is after completion of work, not while work is being done. 8, 230-40.4 water issues. Number 9, Route 40 is across the street next door. 10, applicant current license with DENREC may be APC 2013-00207/C/O. Let me, okay, so I'm going to close this and then I'm going to ask Kim to put it up on the screen because I think the applicant and his counsel should have the ability to look at several of those and take some time to digest them. So
They should be able to see it, Mr. Mayor. I could pull it up too. So anybody on the call ought to be able to pull up the Q&A.
okay, well that's true. Okay, all right. Well, in that case, fair. But let's go ahead and put it up. Kim, if you can put that chat on the full screen, that's fine. And without further delay, let's ask the applicant to respond to some of the questions. Some of the things they just pointed out looked like for information purposes, but there were other questions in there. So, Counselor, do you have any comments, or does Mr. Carter or Mr. Gamba Gorda have any response?
Yes, thank you very much. I think we've addressed a lot of these points, but essentially, this business started 10 years ago. It was more auto body at that time. It's morphed into corporate maintenance and repair business. So that's why the name is what it is. But it's an essential part of the business because when you have a corporate client, it's like any business owner, you don't want to have to go to 2 different places to get something done if it can be done in the same shop. Certainly, these corporate clients need efficiency, and efficiency would be that when he needs to do body work and painting, he can do it at his business. I think it's pretty basic. I mean, I'm sure we could provide substantiation for that work if required. It's obvious if anyone's been in that building, it was a body shop building. I mean, it's painfully obvious. That's what it was built for, and that's what it should be. Now, I understand that the DG zoning coming in, but what I want to point out is that the whole front of the property is committed to the DG zoning. Mr. Gamba Gorda is committing to, even if someone came in the next 3 years before he's required to go with the DG zoning, he's committing that the front part, the part that's going to be visible to the public, is going to be for DG uses. So in fact, this plan, if it went forward, is allowed for the subdivision of the property, and it allows for him to sell the front acre, whatever that footage is, for someone to put a DG use in the front. And that's going to be a lot more appealing to somebody than trying to buy the whole property. And certainly no one's going to pay the value that's going to happen if this deal were to go forward. In this building that's in good condition, could be improved and made nicer. But it's clear it was a body shop. I know the current owner sent a letter and indicated that they had maintained the property in good order. I think my client has clearly described a situation where this building and property would be much, much nicer than it is today. There's no landscaping on the site whatsoever. We have a commitment to do this landscaping. One way or another, we can do this landscaping. It might have to be creative. I don't see that being an issue if somehow there was an environmental issue that made it more difficult or not. My client is committing to doing the landscaping screen on top of all the improvements to the building. Certainly, when we've received the letter back from Mr. Bergstrom, we're expecting that it would say that all 5 uses were permitted. That was early in our due diligence. When it came back, we didn't do the phase 1 or phase 2 yet. But I can tell you in our contract, we are doing those because obviously I'm not going to let my client buy the property unless he's protected from future environmental issues. The only way to do that is to go through the brownfields program. And then the ultimate goal of that is to get the COCR once you've completed whatever's required by DENREC. So clearly, as his attorney, we are going to do those studies because if you don't, that's negligence. And particularly since we know this area might have problems, and having a COCR will make the property more valuable once DENREC agrees that it's been satisfied, any issues are satisfied. But we don't think there's going to be any problem in doing landscaping if we have to put it on top of that existing pavement, which I don't think is the case, but one way or another, we can do that. In terms of the improvements, I'll let Michael Carter address how quickly do you think you would do the improvements set for on the voluntary assurances?
So Mr. Carter, could you just pause for 1 second? Kim, we've got the wrong thing up. So if you just go back to the screen with all the participants, that would be helpful. Okay, Mr. Carter, go ahead.
I think we would project after purchase to have all the upgrades and everything done within 6 months of building purchase. Other than the paving of the parking lot, I don't know when, what that's going to entail, but everything else within 6 months.
Thank you. Are there any other comments you want to make to any of the questions or comments that were in that chat?
Yes, number 7 was the $90 per day after completion of work. That's not true. Any vehicle that's deemed totaled, it's charged $90 a day from the day it was received. So I'm not sure from the silent party where that came from, but
that also encourages
that encourages the insurance company to, if a car comes in and for some reason it does finally get to us and it is deemed totaled, they get charged $90 a day for storage. So they're picking it up the very day they know it's totaled. So we don't have any cars sitting on the lot that are ripped apart waiting on insurance. They don't wait. They pull them, they take them to insurance auto auctions, and they're out of our hair. So we don't have a ton of cars sitting around waiting for.
Mr. Carter, are you representing that insurance companies can act quickly when it's in their economic best interest?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very good. All right. That statement probably get me in a little bit of trouble with some of my members over here, but anyway, I digress. All right. Any other comments you want to make about that chat?
Unless there was some particular follow-up that the board wanted a response to, I think we've addressed the issues that were raised in the letters and these emails.
Okay.
Questions.
Very good. Very good. Kim, do we have any other public comments?
No, there was, the only other comment was after anonymous attendee said totaled dash body work, $90, not mechanical. That's the only other thing that's down there.
Okay, and I think that was addressed. Okay.
No other hands are up.
Okay. All right. Last call for any other public comment. All right. Seeing and hearing none. Mr. Lasko, I think at this point, am I to close out this phase of the hearing?
You need a motion to adjourn to your business meeting.
I typically do that. So I move that we adjourn this portion of the meeting and go on to the business meeting.
All right. And I, of course, will second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. So we've adjourned this part of the hearing, and we're now going to go to the business meeting where Mr. Athey and I will discuss this. I do have a question, Mr. Lasko, on process. This is a little easier to understand when there are 3 voting members, but what are, and I can understand if it's a 2-0 decision is easy to understand, but for the public, could you explain, and maybe for the applicant too, can you explain what a 1-to-1 vote would yield?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So what we have here, this particular application is an appeal from the building official's decision. If you have a 1-to-1 tie vote, one in favor of reversing that decision and one opposed to that, then the appeal fails. You're going to need 2 votes to approve the appeal is the bottom line.
I understand. Okay. All right. Want to make that clear for people that are watching and listening tonight. Okay. So comments, Mr. Athey, I yield the floor to you for any thoughts and comments between you and I here, just as far as the business part of this meeting.
Okay, be happy to tee it up here. Obviously, the opportunity to enter the Brownfields program is very good. That's something we can't ignore. Also want to acknowledge the applicant's efforts to kind of buffer the use, if you will, and certainly don't doubt their sincerity to become, I believe they use the phrase, an asset to the community. All that being said, Mr. Mayor, I was kind of doing the same exact thing you were doing several minutes ago, looking at the GC zoning, looking at the SC, and I think you used the word or challenged. Is it really ambiguous? And I've come to the conclusion, no, it is not ambiguous. If one looks at the GC zoning, it includes multiple uses. I'll call them kind of heavy uses in that section 34, not just the automotive paint and body shops. It has commercial industrial machinery, commercial industrial repair, building development, general contracting. None of these are allowed in the SC zone. So to me, the code actually is quite clear that the council who was in session at the time the zoning code was written, I think this was a very clear intent of isolating certain uses in the GC zone and allowing other uses in the SC zone. The applicant's attorney certainly made a very compelling argument about the use of the word service. If the code wasn't so clear, in my opinion, between the GC code and the SC code, I would probably maybe be rendering a different conclusion here, or maybe be more open to that. The issue that it is not very well defined, but I'm going to let the clarity of the GC and the SC zoning kind of, in my opinion at least, override that uncertainty. Certainly not the cornerstone of their argument, and I don't think it was necessarily part of the argument. I don't think we can ignore the intent of the DG zoning district either, even though there is the savings clause in there. Clearly, this is not the type of use that the DG zone was created to encourage, I'll say. And the last part of the presentation got into the what is an accessory use. To me, an accessory, I mean, my detached garage is an accessory use to my house, basically. And even the city code in the definitions uses words of incidental and subordinate. I believe the applicant's making the argument that at only 10% of their business, that would be a subordinate use. But I think I'm going to look more back to trying to come up with a better word, but I'll just call it a heavier use. To me, collision repair, vehicle painting, that is a much more impactful use. And I just can't consider something like that incidental to the other parts of the business. So I am definitely inclined to uphold the building official's decision. I'm usually open to conditional approvals. I've been kind of scratching my head for the last hour trying to think, how would I condition this? And I'm really kind of coming up with coming up blank. The precedent thing is really bothering me. It's not, as I clarified with Mr. Lasco some time back, this would really affect the whole zoning district, and this is really, in my opinion, a major code interpretation issue. And actually, now that I think about it, it's not just the DZ zone, the DG zone, it would be any SC zone commercial property in the entire city. We would be, basically broadening what I believe at least was a very clear intent some time back. So absent the mayor convincing me otherwise, I am not inclined to override the building official's decision. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Athey. So I think I had, so let me thank the applicant because I think that the improvements that they have proposed are substantial, and I mean that, and I hope that everybody who is tuned in tonight appreciates the demands on a small business, and how an investment of that size is truly consequential. And the fact that they have been able to set money aside to try to make those kinds of improvements in this location or wherever they may land is frequently not the case. And so a sincere hat tip to them for proposing all of that, because that is by definition a good neighbor. But I feel compelled to revert back to comments that I made earlier, where in the parameters of what we can say and do, I really do look at the clarity with which the existing code was created, and the very intentional differentiation between the GC and the SC districts, and the calling out of body work, auto body work in particular, for the GC zone. And so I similarly feel that this would probably not be the right direction for us to go. And also I have to, not anything, and I want to say this to the applicant and to the property owner. Don't take these things lightly. And I'm sure Mr. Athey feels similarly. I really do want to work with property owners and businesses, especially ones that have shown a good faith and made a good faith presentation like the one tonight. However, the trends in this area, in the DG zone, are starting to materialize along the lines of what the DG zone was intended to do. There is a new $17 to $20 million multifamily investment that was recently completed. This area is progressing in a way that is more residential than and it's kind of shaking off its old industrial, if you will, and commercial use from that perspective. And so when I think of the bigger picture, and I think of other places around our community where, we have a couple of prime locations, whether it's over by the Municipal Services Commission building and the police department, where Benchmark Transmissions is. We have Center Point Industrial Park. We've got the Harvey Hanna property, Twin Spans. We have Cherry Lane. We have places set aside that are frankly, in some ways, places up on 13 near the farmers market that are perhaps more appropriate for this type of activity. I would like to see the applicant go forward with, and I understand I think I understand the economics of the business. I certainly don't appreciate him as well as Mr. Carter does. I would never suggest that. He's in the business. He's going to get it better than anybody here. but I understand how, you know, a minor repair here, a minor repair there, those larger shops that have, like the one that his counsel described over on 13, you know, where they've made heavy investment into frame machines and to other kinds of things to make more substantial repairs. You know, in order to free those kinds of operations up, taking care of some of these smaller projects and incidental projects, I think are probably, I get the business case for it. I think it certainly makes some sense. But I can't get past the fact that our code is quite clear. And for those reasons, I'm going to have to deny the appeal. Mr. Lasko, what steps do we have at this point?
You've both given reasons, but you need to make a formal motion, second it, and cast your votes.
Okay. Mr. Athey, would you like to make a motion?
Get myself off mute. Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I move that we uphold the building official's decision that collision repair and vehicle painting are not permitted uses in the SC zoning district.
I will second that. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed, none, obviously, so on a 2-0 vote. Mr. Lasko, do we have any other business to conduct other than a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn would be it. I'll make that.
I move.
That one I can make.
Okay.
All right, I second.
So in favor of closing out this hearing signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. We are adjourned. I want to thank everybody for their time and attention and presentations tonight.
Have a good evening.
Thank you too.
Good night.